And I see students, thank you so much for joining us today. Today we are going to have another one of our virtual workshops hosted by the U.S. Army. This is going to be a great chance to learn some skills and knowledge, part of our telehealth case competition. This session is being recorded for our students that can attend this week, as we know it's midterm week. Um, but we have our very generous guest, Sergeant Allen, who, as always, is sharing his insights with us. And today we're going to be focusing on resiliency. And so I'll turn it over to him and let him get started on the presentation for today.
All right. Thank you, everybody. As you said, I'm Sergeant Allen. I'm going to share my screen so we can get going. We'll do there we go. So I hope everyone can see that okay. I'm starting out today. We're talking about resiliency. It is a huge topic. It's super great for everybody, especially in the healthcare field, just because you do come across a lot of hardships, whether that's a difficult patient or just the stress of working a lot. So we'll just go ahead and continue the agenda for today. We're going to talk about catastrophizing, which is just a fancy way of saying catastrophic thinking. We're going to talk about how we can put things in perspective, which is a resiliency tool that we use here in the Army, as well as real-time resiliency. It's just another tool to kind of help you maintain your resiliency as you go through difficult events. So starting with catastrophizing, what it is it's essentially just a waste of your critical energy because you're stuck on that worst case scenario, that worst case outcome, and it prevents you from taking that purposeful action. The three kind of pitfalls or the three categories that it falls into is a downward spiral, a scatter shot, and circling. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about kind of some of the triggers that come along with the catastrophizing. So first thing we'll talk is the downward spiral. And what that is you have your activating event, something stressful that's going to cause you a little bit of anxiety. And then you just start on that downward spiral and you're going down, just thinking of the worst case, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Right. And it just doesn't seem like you're going to get out of it. The next one is the scatter shot. And that one is you have your activating event again, whatever that is, and then your brain just starts going all over the place, and you start thinking about many disconnected, catastrophic things. So you take your one activating event, and then you're going in a bunch of different directions with it. And then the last one is circling, and that's where your catastrophic thinking just kind of goes in a circle, and you just keep getting stuck in that little loop, and you just keep going around and around and around and around, and you can't seem to break that pattern. What that does, like I said, it prevents you from taking that purposeful action. You just get stuck. Sorry. So then some of the things that will trigger that catastrophic thinking or the catastrophizing is when you're in a situation that's ambiguous. So kind of the fear of the unknown plays or takes effect here. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so you start, those downward spirals, a scatter shot where they're circling, and you just keep going in those bad patterns or negative patterns. Something you value, like highly value, is at stake. So if there's something that you highly value, your car, your life, whatever it may be, your career, if that's at stake, that's going to cause anxiety and that fear. And again, you're going to kind of fall into those catastrophic patterns. You're run down or depleted. This is a big one for the healthcare industry because a lot of times we do have to work until we are on absolute empty. And that is when your mental health kind of takes its toll a little bit, or it takes a toll on your mental health, just because you're going to be sitting there thinking about, oh man, I'm tired, and then that leads you into worse things and tends to happen with the downward spiral. And then you already fear the situation. So if you already have a natural fear, something that you know for a fact you're afraid of, whether it's public speaking or whatever the case is, lions, who knows, it could be whatever, and you have to deal with that fear, you're already going to be anxious and you're already going to be prone to the catastrophizing or catastrophic thinking. And lastly, if it's your first time doing something, so if you've never done something before, again, that fear of the unknown, that unsureness is going to come into play. And a lot of times, if you're already an anxious person or in that situation, you're going to just increase that anxiety and make things a little bit worse, because you're going to be thinking, oh, what could go wrong? I've never done this before. I'm not going to be good at it, whatever. And you're just going to keep going and keep going. And so that's kind of the catastrophizing in a nutshell. And it's not necessarily a good thing, obviously. So we're going to keep going and talk about the next thing and how we can break that pattern. And one of the key ways is to put it in perspective. And what that or the goal of put it in perspective is to lower your anxiety, increase your optimism. It's just how you can accurately assess a situation and kind of develop a plan to go with it. Now, the steps that we use for the put it in perspective tool is what we call it, just a tool, is describe the activate event, capture the worst case scenario or the worst case thoughts, and generate the best case, identify the most likely outcome, and develop a plan to deal with the most likely. So we'll kind of go through step by step and we'll kind of dive into it here a little bit. So the first one is going to be capture your worst case thoughts. Well, or describe the activity. I'm sorry. So you'll just describe accurately what is actually going on. You want to be as accurate as possible, because if you're lying to yourself, then the tool isn't going to work. And that leads you into how you capture those worst case thoughts. So once you start the catastrophic thinking process, whether it's downward spiral, circling, whichever one it is, once you identify that, hey, this is happening, then you can take that action to break the cycle. And when you capture, you want to do it in order. So capturing your worst case thoughts is huge. You want to make sure that you start with the activating event and then just go in that pattern until you deplete absolutely all worst case scenarios that your brain can come up with. So that leads you to, oh, everything happens and now I'm dying. Like whatever the case is, you want to run out of ideas as far as the worst case scenario is concerned. And then you can move on to generating your best case thoughts or ideas. And when you do that, you want to do the same thing you did with the worst case. You're going to generate your best case thoughts until you run out of ideas or thoughts that you can come up with. And if it becomes a little bit ridiculous, like, hey, I was late to work, but it happens that I found a lucky coin on the sidewalk and that led me to the pawn shop and I sold it for $500,000 or whatever. Like, even if it's a little bit unrealistic, that's okay. Just keep going to build those best case thoughts, because that's going to help change your mood and put you in a better place, a more rational place to be able to move on. So once you've done that, once you've done both those things, you kind of want to rate your mood so you can compare and contrast. So you say, oh, hey, I did the worst case thoughts and my mood is very bad. And then once I did the best case, now my mood it's better. It's getting or trending in the right direction. And then you're going to identify the most likely outcomes, right? So now that your mood is a little bit better, your mind's a little bit clearer, you're going to go into identifying the most likely outcomes, which is going to help you to develop that plan. So you want to figure out of my two lists that I made, the worst case and the best case, which ones are most likely, right? So some of them might come from the best case, some of them might come from the worst cases. If you're being honest, you'll be able to figure out which one is most likely to happen. And from there, you can move on and develop a plan to deal with whatever that scenario might be. And then once you identify your most likely outcomes, you're going to rate your mood again. And hopefully you'll be to where you're like in a nice balanced mood, or in your energy levels have kind of leveled out. So once you develop that plan of action, so if it's, you had a flat tire or you're late for work, and the most likely outcome is going to be, you might get told, hey, don't do that again. You might get a warning or whatever the case may be. You can develop a plan, apologize, move on, don't let it happen again. Make sure you set your alarm clock earlier. Whatever your plan is that's realistic to solve the scenario or prevent the scenario from happening in the future, that's what you want to do. And you want your plan to be realistic. You want it to make sure that it's brief and not super detailed, because the more detailed, that could actually lead you to be more anxious. But that's kind of like the put it in perspective idea. So just kind of recap that whole shebang. Catastrophizing is going to deplete your energy levels. It's going to make you more anxious and less optimistic. And as you go through the put it in perspective process, you are going to be able to increase those energy levels, deplete all the worst case scenarios. So all those ideas are out of your head, kind of like when you get a song stuck in your head, you're able to get them out, generate those best case scenarios so that you can increase your optimism and your energy levels and your mood, and then identify the most likely outcomes and develop a plan to deal with those outcomes. And if you do it right and you're honest with yourself, it should increase your optimism about the situation and kind of help you move past that activating event. So how does that work when you're dealing with a patient? It's a little bit tougher because it is a longer process when you're doing the put it in perspective model. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about is more in the moment. So this is something that you would use when you're going into a program or a project or a presentation, whatever the case is, that you already know is going to cause anxiety or catastrophic thinking or whatever the case is. You want to make sure that you can use this ahead of time when you're starting to feel those anxious feelings, so that you can put everything in perspective and move on and be successful with whatever it is you're trying to do. So next, we're going to talk about real-time resiliency. So this is probably my favorite tool that the Army has given me as far as resiliency is concerned. And the same goal, or same or similar to put it in perspective, the goal here is to increase your optimism and fight the counterproductive thoughts. The difference is that this is meant to be done in the moment, quickly, all in your head. You don't have to like write anything down or go through a whole extensive process. It's something that if you practice it, you can happen boom, 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 real quick. So when that activating event does happen, if it's unexpected, you can correct yourself and get back on course in a timely manner. So the idea here is you want to fight those counterproductive thoughts, and then we'll go over pitfall slash weak responses, and then some sentence starters that you can go through in your head to help you move past some of those difficult situations. All right. Sorry, just going through my notes here. Okay. So the pitfall and the weak responses, right? So a pitfall response is something that's going to lead you to, or lead the skill to not be successful. It's going to be counterproductive to the skills process. The three main ones that we go over is dismissing the grain of truth, minimizing the situation, and rationalizing or excusing one's contribution to a problem. So when it comes to the dismissing the grain of truth, let's say for myself example, like I wasn't prepared to teach the resiliency presentation today, so I came into this unprepared, and now I'm realizing, oh no, I'm not doing as well as I hoped. So when I'm dismissing the grain of truth, would be an example would be, oh no, I'm totally prepared, I got this, right? So I'm just ignoring the fact that I didn't prepare. And then the minimizing the situation, same scenario. If I'm minimizing the situation, it would be something like, hey, who cares if my students or you don't understand the material? That's not my problem. Just, minimizing it to make it seem like it's not as big of a deal. Pretty self-explanatory. And then rationalizing or excusing your own contribution. That one is a little bit more serious to me, because then you're kind of lying to yourself. And sorry. The example that I would use for that one is that the class didn't understand it, or they didn't. It wasn't my fault that you didn't understand. It's because the material's not good. The material's subpar, so that's the reason why the presentation failed. It wasn't because of me. I didn't do anything wrong. And so those are pitfall responses, like I said, just because it doesn't produce improvement. It doesn't help you at all. It just kind of makes things worse in the long run. And a weak response is something that's going to be a little bit more along the lines of, I'm just going to blow this presentation. Like it's weak. There's no substantial, or there's no substance to it. It's just, I'm going to blow it. Oh, well, move on. So you want to avoid those types of responses when you're going through this real-time resiliency skill, like in the moment when that activating event happens. Now, let's talk about how we can use the tool effectively to overcome the real-time or the resiliency or activating event, whatever it is at that time. So you want to use evidence, and that's going to be good for whatever it is. If you're using evidence to bolster your tools, you're going to be good. And the sentence starter that you would use is, I will use the same scenario. I'm going to blow the presentation because I'm not prepared. And you say, well, that's not completely true because whatever the case may be. You can say something like, that's not completely true because I rehearsed, or because I developed the whole PowerPoint presentation, so I know all the material, I've studied, and I've done well. And that'll help you to overcome that anxiety ridden event. Generate a more optimistic view. And that's just kind of changing your perspective of the way you're seeing things so that you can be more positive with the outcome. A more optimistic way of seeing this is, and then continue on, the students are going to be attentive. I am going to do well because I am practiced and I'm ready to go. And then lastly, put it in perspective. It's not the same as like the whole tool, so you don't need to go through the whole process with this one. It's just a sentence starter, so you can put things in perspective in a quick manner. The most likely implication is blah blah blah, and you want to make sure that you are, again, being honest with yourself and being honest and throughout the process so that you can increase the amount of success. But I'll give you a better example. That'd be the most likely implication is that I'll need to work extra hard to solidify my reputation, and I can talk to whoever the expert is that created the material to be better next time. If that is the situation where I actually blow the whole presentation, which hopefully isn't happening. No. Um, those are the sentence starters. Like I said, you want to do this quick in the moment. The faster or the more you do it, the more accurate you'll be and the faster you'll be. And with same with the put it in perspective, this is a tool that you want to use accurately. You want to be as honest as you can. What are your questions about the things that I've gone over so far? And we can kind of dive more into it if that is what you want to do. I will There's my information also in case you want to reach out to me to ask any other questions if you didn't want to ask them on here, or if you are interested in any of the information about the healthcare careers in the Army, you can hit me up at that phone number. You can call, text, and then my email is there as well. So screenshot it, take a picture, whatever it is you got to do. But I'm going to stop sharing, and then I will take questions in the chat box as well. If you want to jump on and turn your microphone on, you can ask that way too. All right. With that, I will move into kind of the plug, if you will. It's the health profession scholarship program is what I want to talk about lastly. And what that is it is a scholarship program that pays 100% tuition for medical, dental, CRNA, veterinary, clinical psychology, and optometry schools. And on top of the tuition payment, you get a monthly stipend that it changes every year, but this last year was $2,466 a month for those months that you're in school. It will also pay for some of the books and fees associated with your program. Um, it's an active duty program. So once you finish, whether it's medical school or dental school and your residencies, then you would serve in the Army in the Army as a physician or dentist or whatever program you went through. It's fantastic. The leadership experience and knowledge that you're going to get is unmatched, as well as the residency options. If you're going through the medical school program, you can apply to the Army residency program, and you kind of get front loaded, or you get first pick essentially. And so last year, the HPSP recipients had an 85% match rate with their number one residency choice and 97% match rate with residencies overall. So very few people didn't match with their residency, and most of them got what they wanted, like as far as the specialty. So if you have any questions about the HPSP program, please let me know, contact me, and I will be more than happy to answer your questions and discuss all your options.
Hi, Anthony. I have a quick question about the program. I'm just wondering, is there any dermatology like specialties that are offered?
Yeah, so the Army does have pretty much every specialty and residency program that's out there. There's a couple that we don't, like podiatry and pediatrics, but that's just because there's not a huge need for them in the Army. But other than that, there's hundreds, or over 100 at least. There's a lot, and dermatology is one of them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
What would psychiatrists do in the Army, or like clinical psychologists, like you said?
So clinical psychologists, they'd be doing exactly that. They'd be practicing clinical psychology in the Army. They'd be treating soldiers. You could also treat family members and do research as well as another option, depending on kind of where you fall as or get assigned. Um, but there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of different things in the Army. And psychology or the mental health field in general is a growing field with the military, because I think they're finally realizing that what we do isn't necessarily the easiest on our mental health. So they wanted to make sure that we're taken care of. But great question. All right. Like I said, if you have any other questions at any time, feel free to contact me, and I'm more than happy to speak with anybody.
Sardan, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights, and once again being able to not only provide an overview on how it relates to telehealth, but being able to give us more information on the health profession scholarship. So we appreciate all your time, and looking forward to having you part of the next workshop in our live scenario. I'm going to end the recording now, but this